and today we will be talking about the basics of your spending plan. However, before we get started, I wanted to introduce one of our founders of DVU, and who's on our board of directors, Allison Morantz. Allison is going to be making a short presentation and asking for your help on a project that she is leading where she works, which is at Stanford Law School, and she is the director of the Stanford Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities Law and Policy Project, or CIDLAP. And she's doing a project that she's co-sponsoring with DVU, and it's critically important. So take it away, Allison.
Thanks so much, Judy. I hope everybody can hear me. Am I good? Terrific. Okay. So as I think a lot of you know, they're speaking more broadly here than just self-determination, although self-determination is certainly a context in which there can be barriers. Something we're trying to understand better is people's experiences, both with trying to become eligible for regional center services and also with trying to obtain services from their regional centers. And more specifically, we're focusing on kind of different stages in the process of becoming, initially applying for regional center services. What do people know? Kind of what don't they know? What don't they understand? Because our focus is kind of people's ability to enforce their rights, under state law, and challenges, difficulties that people face at each stage in the process. So that would be initially at the eligibility stage. That would be at the stage when they're preparing for an IPP and they're trying to figure out how to go about making their case during the IPP that they should receive a particular service or their child should receive a particular service. And then for people who receive of a notice of action and end up considering going to fair hearing, we're also looking at kind of what people understand or don't understand or challenges they face in that context. Like when they get the notice of action, what do they do with it? Do they understand it? And then some of you know, but maybe, maybe not most of you, there's other steps, that before you go to what's called the fair hearing to challenge a determination by the regional center that you either are not eligible or can't get services, there's other things that happen. So we're trying to sort of unpack, each of those steps in the process and understand people's experiences. So this survey is designed to get at that. And we're trying to distribute it as widely as possible. I've already put it earlier in the chat, but there's already so many comments, I'm going to do it again. So we have an English version and a Spanish version. And this is a joint project by DVU and the Integrated Community Collaborative, the ICC, Disability Rights California, and the organization that Judy mentioned that I run at Stanford, CIDLAP, the Stanford IDD Law and Policy Project. And just to be clear, if you want to participate, but you're not comfortable sharing your information and you want to make sure that it's confidential, it will be held, it's explained when you look at the survey, but your information will be held completely confidential unless you let us know that you actually would like to speak to people. That could be legislative staff later on if we're, we want to make some reforms based on some of these findings. It could be people at DDS, it could be other policymakers. So if you're interested, in sharing your story, and you could share your story anonymously with us, we might just call you and confidentially, get more information about your experience, but without sharing any information about you that would make anybody be able to identify you, right? So there's a lot of different things we can do. You can also just fill it out anonymously and submit it, and we won't even call you. We won't even know who you are. So you can decide the level of participation, but the really key thing from our perspective is to gather information from people across all 21 regional centers. We're trying to get as widespread participation as possible among different racial and ethnic groups, both self-advocates and family members, to really understand in a very detailed way. You'll see it's a pretty detailed survey, but it's also pretty quick. I mean, there's just a bunch of boxes that you check if you've had experiences. So my best guess is it would take 10 minutes, maybe 15. But if you're willing to spend that time, it would be so helpful to us, and also to distribute among other people who either have tried to get regional center services or are clients of the regional center, or whose family members or children. And so both the links are there. Feel free to reach out to me. I guess I'll also put my email in the chat just in case. This is my name and my email. So if you have particular questions, feel free to reach out to me as well. And ultimately, this will probably be, the goal is to have this be a report, you know, that on the basis of not just what these surveys are, these findings, but various other, you know, information that we're gathering about this system. So we hope that you'll participate and share it, share it far and wide, so many people participate. And again, feel free to reach out to me with questions.
Thank you so much, Allison. We cannot stress the importance of this enough. We hear from the community a lot that hearings, they're called fair hearings, but the ICC has labeled them as unfair hearings. And, you know, being able to look at how it works and how to make it a fair process or an alternative process is definitely something that we are excited to participate in. So hope everybody looks in your chat and is involved in this project, this research project. Thank you, Allison.
Thanks.
Allison's son is in the self-determination program, by the way. I should have introduced you that way as well. Of course he is. You're a DVU founder. All right, thanks, Allison. All right, so we're going to get started today. As I mentioned, the subject today is the basics on your spending plan. So as usual, we'll do, I didn't even get a chance to introduce Molly Kennedy. Molly Kennedy is our program fellow at DVU, and Molly helped to put this together. And at some point, Molly, I'm just going to throw it to you and have you explain things. Molly is like the most flexible person ever. She's like, sure, I'll do that. So Molly and I will present this. After I present it, I'm going to show a sample spending plan that is based on my son's spending plan. I have changed all the numbers, so it in no way reflects reality. However, I'm not going to, the slideshow you will be able to get a copy of. We will put it on our website as well as a PDF of it in the chat. However, you will not be able to get a copy of the actual example spending plan because it is, I don't want you to be, everybody's different. Like, I don't want you to copy what we do for one person. You should have your own individualized spending plan based on your person-centered plan and your goals. Okay, so let's get started. I have to find it. There it is. I believe I'm sharing the correct thing. I'm looking at Molly. Are you seeing my
Yes.
the slides? Okay, great. Okay. All right, so the basics on your spending plan part 2. For those of you who may not have been here last week, we had a part 1, which you can find on our YouTube page. Or if you're not on our mailing list, you can get on our mailing list so you'll always see these sent out to you. We went over what the rules are. I'll be touching a little bit on that today as well. But mostly we're going to be going through the mechanics of creating a spending plan, okay? So just a little recap, what is a spending plan? It's the plan that details exactly how you will spend your budget to meet your IPP goals and your person-centered planning goals, but in particular, your IPP goals. It cannot include those items that could be paid for by generic resources such as school districts, insurance, Department of Rehabilitation. It has to include the cost of the financial management service and the independent facilitator. By the way, to remind you, your individual budget amount does not get increased to include the costs for the FMS and the independent facilitator. It must include all the taxes, insurance, and other costs associated with hiring workers, including health insurance, if you want to include that. Okay, so moving on to the next slide. So that's just we went over that in great detail last week, so I'm doing this part rather quickly, but I'll spend a little bit more time in the next slide, okay? All right, so step number 1. Always remember that that your person-centered plan informs your IPP. I'm going to say that like 20 times, or else my autism mom, Connie Lapin, will take me to task. So remember, the first thing you've got to do is you don't have to end up with the final plan at the beginning. You have to look at your person-centered plan, figure out which of those pieces in your person-centered plan you are going to apply to your IPP. And remember that your IPP is related to your disability, and your person-centered plan does not have to be related. I've used this example several times, but in my son's first person-centered plan, one of his dreams and hopes was that he wanted to spend more time with his grandfather. That cost no money, and that's not a goal related to his disability, but it was something that was important to him. And so it ended up in his person-centered plan, but it did not end up in his IPP. So you want to make sure that your person-centered plan informs your IPP, and that everything that is in your IPP came from your person-centered plan, but they're not the same thing. Remember that, they're not the same thing. So out of those activities and goals that you put in your IPP related to your person-centered plan, you want to list all those services, activities, items needed to meet your IPP goals. So let's say one of your IPP goals is to get a job. You spent a lot of time in your person-centered planning talking about the kind of work you want, the kind of support you might need to get that kind of work. Let's say you want to start your own business. The goal of starting your own business or getting a job in the community ends up as a goal in your IPP. But that's not the same thing as having it in your spending plan. So during your person-centered planning process, you should have been figuring out what that looks like. So let's say your goal is to be a gardener. Like you love gardening and you want to get a job as a gardener's apprentice. And so what are the things you need? You might need tools, gardening tools. You might need someone to teach you gardening skills, and maybe someone to help market you to become a gardener. So those are the specific things that you need. So there are items you need to purchase. There's people you need to hire to assist you. And then maybe you need a regular job coach for every hour that you're on the job. So you have to list those items, and all of those items will end up in your spending plan. Remember, I'm going to say this over and over again, that all of the items on that list need to be linked to your IPP goals. We've been hearing a lot of problems that people are having by the regional center saying, we don't want to pay for this. Like you can't, they say they approve it. They're not allowed to approve it, but they're allowed to review it. And if they say, no, there is no goal attached to this, that's a problem. So you have to make sure from the outset that you say, okay, my son wants to take a creative writing class, or I want to take an art class. What goal does that relate to that's in your IPP? So it might be, I want to take a creative writing class because I hope to become a writer someday. Or maybe I have a lot of anxiety and it keeps me calm to write down what I'm feeling in the creative writing class. So whatever goal that is meeting is what you want to make sure you're connecting it. You could even go so far as in your spending plan, listing exactly what goal it's meeting so that you're doing the work for the regional center, okay? Okay, step number 2. I'm going to throw this over to Molly.
Okay, so would you have a list of the services and supports from your IPP goal? You need to make sure that the services and the support are approved by the federal government. And if you have the wonderful DVU book, there is a section in that book that highlights the what it covered. And there are 3 areas, big areas: living arrangement, employment and community integration, and health and safety. So each area has what they will support funding wise. So it's helpful to look at that list, so you're not putting in things that won't get funded. They must be integrated. So unlike, well, traditionally in the traditional services, there are groups that are segregated. That will change when the new rule comes down. But in self-determination, everything has to be integrated in the community. So if it's a painting class, it's gotta be all kinds of people, not just people with IDD. So in living in your home, it's considered community integration. So services in your home are okay. You also want to look at that list and make sure that what can be paid for by generic resources are paid for by generic resources. That is a requirement, and it helps to give you more funds to distribute in your plan. So any healthcare issues that can be paid through insurance, anything that's school related that the district would pay for. If you have IHSS, that needs to be come first before you add anything else. Did I get that right, Judy?
Yes, you did.
So the other thing is that you can have supports and services that can be natural supports that people don't pay for. Like for me, if I have someone come and take me somewhere, I don't need to pay for transportation. So look at things that, you know, a family member or a friend like, oh, I'll go to that class with you and be your support, because I want to take that class too. So that would become natural supports, and you wouldn't put any funding towards that support.
All right, hold on real quick. I just need to make Ed lost signal. All right, so hopefully that worked. Okay, I made it. Oh, I'm trying to, Ed. I'm trying to make you host, but it's not working. Sorry, Ed, it's not working. I will try again. All right, let me, oh, there it is. Okay, now it worked. Okay, yay. All right, everybody, let me keep going. Sorry about that. We were having some issues on the back end, but Ed is back. Phew. All right, remember, as Molly said, you know, we know that it gets frustrating to hear about generic resources and natural supports, but it really helps you stretch your budget. I also wanted to just take a moment to promote our lovely book that you can purchase on our website. And we promise that we will send it to you as soon as we can Right now, I'm in charge of sending you these things because we don't have staff to do it. So it's going to get a little bit delayed. All right. Step 3 is determining the specific costs. So one of the things you want to ask for every single service is, how often do you need this service? Is it every day? Is it once a week? Is it once a year? You're just going one time. The other thing you want to ask is, when will it start and end? These are little common mistakes people make. It's, you know, you may say, okay, well, I want to join a gym, but right now it's COVID, so I probably won't join the gym for 3 more months. So you might want to use it for fewer months on your spending plan. How much are you going to pay? And are you paying by the hour, by the day, by the session? You know, if you're paying a person, it might be by the hour, but if you're paying for a class, it's going to be probably by the session. So you want to make sure you're adding the numbers correctly. Remember, you're not in this alone. You have help. You have help from your FMS and you have help from your independent facilitator. You also want to think about who's providing this. So for example, let's say you want to join a gym. You know, you can't just like make it up. You really want to sit and do some research about how much that might cost. So you might want to look at a couple of different gyms and put a dollar amount for what you think is you're going to end up spending. Remember, you can change your spending plan. You are a human being and we can change our minds. What person without a disability makes a determination about what they're doing for an entire year in advance and never changes their mind? So of course you can change your mind. We're trying to, what we're trying to do is to make it so that changing your spending plan is very easy and seamless. And that right now we know is not the case at most regional centers. I just want to make a point of something that has nothing to do with the spending plan, is that I know a lot of you are sending private messages to Ed and sometimes to me. It actually makes it really hard. And it also, if you are sending a private message, the only reason you should be doing that is if you desperately need to keep your question confidential. In most cases, your question does not have to be confidential. You can be asking these things so that everyone knows. So it helps for everyone to see each other's questions, and we may not get to all the questions. So if we save the chat, and if you put it in the chat and it's not private, we'll be able to have it and we'll know what questions exist. Okay, just wanted to say that. Okay, it's so important that if you're hiring staff to help you, that you're including employer taxes and insurance. These are things that your FMS will help you with to make sure that you're doing it in the right way. You want to make sure that you're getting, there's lots of different taxes. There's state taxes, there's federal taxes, and there's even different kinds of federal taxes. So you want to make sure you're taking care of all of it. And one thing that's come up recently with someone that is a friend of mine is that you have to make sure you have backup staff if, let's say, you're living on your own. If you're living on your own and you don't have family who can be your natural support backup, you have to make sure that you are budgeting for that backup staff. So it might mean that you have somebody who's just on call and maybe makes a certain amount per month to just be on call. And then once they're on, they're making, an hourly rate. So it's really important that you think about all the emergency situations you might be in and that you budget for it. Because remember, you cannot spend more than your individual budget amount. And you will get a monthly summary from your FMS about how much you've been spending. And if you are going over your budget, you will at a certain point not be able to spend any more money. Okay. All right. So I wanted to show you this spending plan worksheet that is part of the orientation. So this is the orientation that DDS created for all of you to go through, and I helped them create this and think it's somewhat helpful. It's obviously more complicated than it needs to be because it's a government document, but I want to go through this for you this worksheet, you can find this worksheet on the DDS website, and you will get it in your orientation. All right. So what you want to do is think of one of your goals and what service might you use to help reach that goal. Remember, you want to ask, can another source pay for those services instead of your self-determination budget? And if you want to have your budget pay for it, you have to put it in your spending plan. So all of what I just said, how often will you have this service? How many hours per week? When is it going to start? When is it going to end? Is it a one-time fee, a monthly fee? You know, all these questions you need to answer. And you have to do some math to figure it out. Remember, you're not by yourself. You have people to help you. So here's an example that they give from DDS. Is that I remember here they actually have a column to put your IPP goal. Now, your IPP goal is it's not often a column in the form that your regional center or your FMS will give you. So you may want to have them add it to be sure that it's there. Okay. So here you have the goal is to find a job near where I live. I'm going to need a job coach, and that's called employment supports in the self-determination program. How often do you need to have this person? 3 days a week for 3 hours a day. When are you going to start? First Monday after I graduate from school, ending next April when the IPP is reviewed. You're going to pay them $18 per hour. And then this is a flat 18% that we're saying you should add. In your spending plan, you will have to be much more specific than that 18%. I'm going to show you in the sample spending plan how this actually works. Then your total amount is, so you're taking 3 hours a day times 3 days a week is 9 hours per week. They're going to be working with you. Then July through April is 10 months. So you have to multiply 9 times 10. So that's 90 hours. Then 4 weeks a month. And then 9 hours a week for 40 weeks equals 360 hours. So then we have the $18 an hour times that 18% of all those taxes and insurance and everything. And then it comes to a total of $7,646.40 for that line item. So I know for some of you that may be very complicated, which is why I think it's very important for you to get a good independent facilitator, an FMS, to help you figure this out, because it can be really complicated. Okay. All right. So once you have all the detail, okay, you know what, I'm gonna throw this over to Molly, this slide.
Okay, so once you have all the details, you will put it into the form. Now, most regional center coordinators will help you do this if you need help, or an independent facilitator. My regional center coordinator does it once I give her all the figures, and she makes sure it adds up. And sometimes it takes more than one to make sure it adds up. If you haven't done budget, especially in itself, but you know what you want to make sure is when you create the budget and you list everything and what you're gonna budget each thing for, it's got to total the amount in your individual budget. So if it's over what you agreed upon on your individual budget, then you need to go back because you don't have that much money. So, again, you got to make sure that you have things in the in the plan that can be paid for. Everything is geared towards the regulations. They meet the regulations. But I think once you see it all laid out, once you do it along with your IF or regional center coordinator, it will make sense. But the work is really deciding what you want, how much you want to spend in each of these areas.
Thank you. And remember, just a note that you'll send it to your regional center service coordinator to review. They do not approve your spending plan. They cannot say things like, do you think that's really a good idea for you to get a job? Or do you really, really want to spend your time exercising? They're not allowed to say that. Or do you really like that stuff? It's, yes, these are my choices. And they cannot micromanage your spending plan as long as it meets all the rules that we talked about. Inclusion in the community. You're exhausting all those generic resources first, and it's a service that's in the what's called the federal waiver or the contract we have with the federal government.
Oh, Judy,
you want to go back?
I just say, I don't know if this is clear, but you would not include in your spending plan any of the things that are generic services. Do not include them in your plan, because they don't need to be in there, or natural support. Just the items that you are gonna use to receive funds from the regional center for should be in your spending plan.
Thank you, Molly. So just a little note on budget categories. I really hate this, but I'm going to explain it to you because it's actually not nearly as complicated as it sounds. So all of the services you have fall into one of three categories: living arrangements, employment and community participation, and health and safety. So as you are doing your spending plan, you have to label which one of these budget categories it falls in. You can transfer up to 10% of your total budget amount into another budget category without any major issues. But if you transfer more than that, you have to have a meeting with your regional center and explain why. And the regional center actually, the IPP team needs to approve it, and the regional center is part of that IPP team. So a lot of people get upset about this. Let me explain to you why this exists, and it's actually not such a big deal. So living arrangements are things like, I live on my own, I have a person who helps me, the kind of a supported living person. I have a housekeeper who comes in. I have, other supports in my home because I live on my own. Then employment and community participation are virtually everything else that you want to do in your life, like getting a job, like joining a gym, like being part of your church, part of a club, going to a dance class, all those kinds of fun, cool things so that you are part of your community. The third thing is related to health and safety. So those would be things like nursing, special durable healthcare, durable medical equipment. Let's say you need to put a special safety device in your home to make sure that you don't fall. All those kinds of things are health and safety. These three categories are very different from one another. So let's say you're a person who has been living on your own and has 24/7 supports, and you decide, let's say because of COVID, you're moving back in with your parents. Your parents are considered that natural support that Molly was talking about before. And so your budget, your overall budget actually will end up going down, because in the traditional system, you would have less 24/7 supports, although that may have changed actually, because they passed a new law this year and changed a budget amount where even if you live with your parents, you can get supports like people who are not living with their parents, like supported living supports, even though you're living at home. So that's now actually an outdated example. All right, let's go with health and safety as a better example. So let's say you're very sick, you need nursing services that are costing, $25,000 a year, but you get better and you no longer need those nursing services. It's not like you can take the $25,000 in nursing services and just throw it over to employment and community participation. You would have to, your budget would likely be lowered because the needs under health and safety are now reduced. So you have to remember that. You may have different needs under health and safety, but you can't just transfer that money over. I hope I know I probably didn't explain it very well, but okay, so I'm going to stop sharing that. And now I'm going to share a sample spending plan. Let me try to find where it is. So I'm gonna share a sample spending plan that is based on my son's spending plan. All the names have been changed. Everything looks different. There's no numbers in here that actually relate to most of the numbers that are in my son's spending plan, but you will not be getting a copy of this, everybody, because you should not be writing my son's spending plan. You should be writing your own spending plan. It should be based on your life and your person-centered plan. Hold on, I have to find it. There it is, I found it. Okay. All right, let me share this. So you see, this is just what my son's spending plan looks like, okay? This is not, let me just try to get rid of the, okay, it doesn't matter. Okay, so this is what my son's spending plan looks like. It doesn't, this is the way that one particular FMS does it. It doesn't, and one particular regional center does it. Your spending plan may look totally different than this, but this is the way my regional center, which is Westside Regional Center, and my FMS, which shall be unnamed, because I don't want to bias anybody in any direction on an FMS. And I certainly don't want to bias you on your regional center. However, you don't get to choose your regional center. So this is the way this one looks. It does not mean that yours looks exactly the same. All right. So you see that our participant's name is Roger Rabbit. We chose Roger Rabbit because that is my son's favorite Disney movie. And it'll have your unique client identifier here. And that is not his number. That is a made up number of Roger Rabbit. Okay. So what you're going to see, as I mentioned, are these three budget categories. So the first one is living arrangements. So Roger Rabbit still lives at home with his family. So Roger has yet to move out and so doesn't have any specific supports for living on his own in his spending plan. All right. But Roger does have FMS services. Everyone is required to have FMS services, and it falls in the living arrangements budget category. All right. So you'll see the budget category is living arrangements. The service is financial management services, and the service code. You don't have to worry about the service code, people. That is the regional center's job to come up with the service code. But I keep hearing these stories about regional centers throwing back to the FMS or throwing back to the independent facilitator or participant. Which service code is this? This has always been the responsibility of the regional center. So, and they're about to get $7.8 million in new staff to work on the self-determination program. So they will be well staffed on this. So you see the total is $150 a month it costs. That's a set rate times 12 months. And that comes to $1,800 per year. So now let's look at the living arrangement. So now let's look at the next category, which is employment and community participation. I told you that most of the activities that people want in their life come under employment and community participation. So first, Roger wants an independent facilitator. Roger feels he needs one for about 2 hours per month for $45 an hour, but every year, to just help him think about his person-centered plan and to maybe find new supports and services. Roger also wants to hire one staff member to support him. And that we're calling community integration support. So that one staff member is going to be paid $20 per hour. And then if you see all these initials here, it includes 8.25% of federal employment insurance. They're called FICA and FUTA. And then there's the state disability insurance at 1%. So there's all these different fees and taxes that you must pay for as the employer for your workers. And you don't have to worry about that because your FMS knows that, okay? And that's $21.85 per hour times 40 hours a week times 50 weeks. So there's a judgment by Roger that Roger's going to go on vacation 2 weeks a year and not use his staff. So it's only for 50 weeks. So that comes to $43,700. Then there are these weird California state taxes, which are one set amount of $245 per year. And so you have to make sure to add every dollar in. So then I wanted to make sure you saw that there was some mention of overtime. So there's going to be, Roger thinks that there might be about 20 hours per year that he will need overtime from his employee. You are required as an employer to pay 1.5 times the rate for overtime. Everything over 40 hours, you must budget for it from the outset. So that would be $30 an hour, and we total it. So it comes to about $655 extra dollars that you need for overtime. Then Roger decides he wants to give health benefits to this employee. So it's about $350 a month for 12 months, okay? So moving on, Roger also is non-speaking, or Roger talks, as you know, Roger Rabbit needs a lot of help with communication. So one of the things that Roger wants to do is to consult with someone who's an expert on typing to communicate. So in here, Roger finds somebody who's $600 to consult with them for a number of hours, and then $1,300 for follow-up appointments. So that's in there. And then you'll see here that Roger wants to make sure that he has a really good communication device to type for his voice output. So he puts in $499 for an iPad and $200 for special applications for communication. And remember that right here, you're not seeing a goal, but you want to make sure that there is an IPP goal for communication, because that way you can tie it all to that. Then maybe one of Roger's goals is to someday move out of his parents' house. And so he wants to hire someone to help him with independent living skills. So you have 200 hours per month for the independent living skill training for 12 months at $100 per hour. And so your regional center may say, that's an outrage that you want to pay someone $100 an hour. Well, that's not their business. You can pay someone whatever you feel is fair based on their level of experience and what you think they bring to you. They're not allowed to micromanage how much you're paying somebody per hour, as long as it meets one of your IPP goals. So Roger also is quite a budding artist and wants to take an art class at the community college. So that's 28 classes per year that he wants to take at $50 a class. Roger also wants to get into good physical shape for Jessica Rabbit. And so Roger is joining Gold's Gym at $30 a month, figures he'll do it for about 11 months a year. Roger also kind of needs to calm down. If any of you have seen Who Framed Roger Rabbit, he does need to calm down a little bit. So he wants to take a yoga class to meditate. and he's also wants to learn how to cook. So you see how we're dividing these classes up. So the total then for employment and community participation is $57,309.60. So you have to literally count down to the penny. So then finally, Roger's like, you know what? I need to eat better. One of my goals is to lose some weight or become a little healthier. Most people's goals are never to lose weight, by the way. It's always to eat healthier. So you want to make sure that it is person-centered in the way the goals are. So Roger wants to hire a nutritionist and found a nutritionist that he likes. And the cost is $195 for the first appointment and $135 for future appointments. So that's $465. They're going to only see the nutritionist 3 times. So the total here is a $59,574.60 spending plan. Remember, it must be less than the individual budget amount. So let's say Roger's budget was just a little bit slightly higher, about $900 higher. And so you would have your spending plan like this. The SDP participant signs the budget, your service coordinator signs the budget, and it gets attached to your IPP. All right. So I just wanted to give you that example. I know it's not an example that everybody has. It's not going to look the same at every regional center or with every FMS. I can tell you, you know, it's based on the spending plan that I helped produce for my son. And I actually wanted to do it in a different way than even other people at that FMS do it. So you can make it how it works for you and that you understand. All right, so I think that's the presentation. I'm going to ask Ed now if she wants to, if there are any questions. Sounds like you were quite busy in the chat.
Always, no rest for the wicked, Judy. So I have quite a few questions in chat. We'll start with one. Actually, let me scroll down. Yeah, we'll start with one from Jenny. When it comes to how duration or frequency of services are calculated, is there an expectation from regional center? For example, for a 22-year-old individual who lives at home, beg pardon, with working parents, beg pardon, would it be reasonable to have 24-hour support? Also, if you're living at home, can you still get SLS or ILS services at home? And I'm going to follow up with this from a question from Pamela because it's related. I'm saying that to remind myself.
All right. So, I'm sorry. Will you rephrase the question again? Because my mind is not working very well.
So, could a let's say a young adult live at home?
Oh yeah, the 24 hours. Now I remember. Okay, now I remember. Oh my God. So 2 months ago, I would have said, no, you cannot have 24-hour services if you live with your parents. However, there was a budget change in this past July 1st, where in the state budget, they now have a new service where people who live with their parents who are adults who need 24/7 supports because the parents cannot offer that. Let's say the person requires a Hoyer lift to move into their bed, and the parents are older and they cannot do that. Let's say the parents work nights, so they're not home in the middle of the night. Let's say the parents are just old and just really can't do it anymore. There's lots of reasons why parents might need that 24/7 supports. So you will be able to get those services in your home. Now, the reason they did this, by the way, is because culturally, they found that white parents move out their children as adults into their own homes and are able to access those 24/7 supports, and that many people of color culturally keep their children at home well into their 40s or 50s. And so that what was happening is we were seeing huge disconnects between the budgets of white adults and adults of color. And so we believe this is going to be a really important change for the system. So what does that mean for your SDP budget? So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to go back in an IPP, and remember that your budget is based on the traditional system. And so what you're going to want to do is to make sure that you're asking for those supports. Wait, I see Nina. I'm going to actually make you a co-host so you can help me answer.
Already done, Judy. Already done.
Yeah. Hi. Hello. I just wanted to say, I didn't want to confuse people. I put in the chat the HCBS spending plan because that's what has that new program that you're talking about. It's actually, it's a pilot program in the HCBS spending plan that's similar to SLS. It's for families, for people living at home, that's similar to the SLS for people who don't live at home along the line. The reasons for them are what Judy's explaining. But I didn't want confusion. The use of the word pilot program may confuse people. This is not the same pilot that was long ago for the SDP or anything like that. But if you want to read it, it's on page 18 in that HCBS spending plan that I posted in the chat.
Nina, who's our program director, thank you. But Nina, we do not know what a pilot program means, right?
Right. We do not know the details about this. We don't know this. I mean, Vivian is probably on. She may know more since she was one of the authors of this fabulous thing. It's what people have been waiting for a very long time, you know, to have something like this. But I don't know the full scope. We don't know the scope of it. We don't know, you know, what it's going to be. But if the spending plan is ultimately approved, there will be, this is something everybody should look out for if you're interested in it and ask about it.
Thanks, Nina. Appreciate it. Okay, next question.
Yes, so I have the next question from Jeff. Do we have to have an independent facilitator identified to get a budget approved?
No, you're not required to have an independent facilitator. I just strongly recommend it. The reason why your independent facilitator, the independent facilitator is optional in the self-determination law, which remember we, the leaders of DVU, helped to write the self-determination law. The reason we made it optional is because we felt not everybody needs a facilitator every year that they're in self-determination. So for example, we had an independent facilitator, even though I'm an expert on person-centered planning and the self-determination program, we still used an independent facilitator to help lead my son's person-centered planning process because I just wanted to be the mom. But in year 2, I did not ask, we did not hire an independent facilitator to lead the planning because it wasn't necessary, especially because of COVID. Not a lot had changed. And so, so you are not required to have an independent facilitator. I just really strongly recommend you use one for your first year in. And there's a ton of, I almost used a cuss word, sorry. There are a ton of them, a poop load of them here on this call right now. So if any of you are independent facilitators and have availability on your caseload, please put the put that in the chat. Put your information in the chat to be hired. Okay. All right, go ahead, Ed.
Yes. So the next question is from Gustavo. How am I supposed to create a 1-year plan when the coordinator told me we'd need to go back to the regional center to get approval for services every 3 months?
What? I don't even know what that means. Like, I'm not sure what services you're going to be required to get approved every 3 months. I have heard even at my own regional center that they're putting in these ridiculous rules for behavior that they'll only approve it for 6 months. So that's just that. There is nothing in the self-determination law which allows regional centers to approve budgets for less than 12 months. The individual budget is a 12-month budget, and regional centers are now making up rules in the absence of actual DDS rules around this. So I have brought up this issue of the 6-month approval to DDS probably 2 or 3 times now, and ask them to weigh in on this, and they have not yet done so. So I should tell you that you shouldn't delay going into the self-determination program just because your regional center is making up rules. You should go in with the budget that is for that service is for 3 months, or that service is for 6 months, and let's try to get this solved. Okay.
I just want to add, just for clarification, Judy, 1 second, Gustavo, the chat moves so fast. Where's your comment? There it is. Gustavo says, NLARC asked me to go back to get approved for PA every 3 months. I don't know what PA stands for.
Oh, it's for personal assistance hours.
Gotcha.
Really? Because your disability, I guess, gets cured every 3 months, so you don't need personal assistance. I would like to know where that is. Okay, that's just, I just really don't understand how this is happening. The regional centers talk to each other, just like we talk to each other, like families and self-advocates talk to each other. Regional centers talk to each other. And what we do is we give ideas to help people's lives get better. But I feel sometimes the regional centers are like, who has the most restrictive possible rule? Oh yeah, that's a restrictive rule. We're going to adopt that at our regional center too. It's for those, I know we have regional center staff here on this call, and you're the good ones, but just like, make it easier, people. This is ridiculous. People cannot budget 3 months at a time. It makes it very, very hard to hire staff and have a life if it's every 3 months.
Great. Thank you, Judy. I have a question from Ryan. Would community participation be meetings or conferences? Would that fall under community participation?
Yes, conferences would definitely be under community, that community participation employment category for sure. Almost everything's under employment and community participation, except for specific supports to live for your living arrangement, or specific assistance for your health and safety. Everything else is under employment and community participation. Everything that you love in your life is under that.
Thank you, Judy. I have a good one from Casey. Is it legal for a regional center to develop a budget without seeing or even asking for a person-centered plan?
Yeah, for sure. That happened with me. They could do that. I wanted them to do that. I absolutely wanted them to do that, because so my son had his person-centered plan on like December 7th and his 2019, and we had his budget meeting on December 8th. And for sure, there was no person-centered plan written up yet. I was able to make the case of what his needs were based on the person-centered plan that we'd had the day before, but there was nothing written up on it. We were able to put things in, remember, it's based on the traditional system. So I know that a lot of independent facilitators are very strongly believe that you should go through an extensive person-centered planning process before you do your budget meeting. I don't agree. I honestly don't agree. I really believe that you can do them simultaneously, because remember that your budget is based on what your needs are in the traditional system, not what your needs are in self-determination. And so it is the meeting you should have before your budget meeting is, let's look at the list of all the services that your regional center pays for in the traditional system, and let's figure out which ones of those would help us. So you might need employment supports, or you might need transportation, or you might need supported living, the respite, personal assistance. Those are all things in the traditional system. And you can make the case that your needs in the traditional system match those services. So I believe it can happen simultaneously. If you are in a rush to get into the self-determination program, they should. Sometimes your person-centered planning process can take months. And so I don't delay. There's a whole bunch of independent facilitators who might completely disagree with me here, but I really think they can happen simultaneously. And your regional center can, if you think that it will benefit you to do your PCP first, then go ahead and do that and present it at your IPP to figure out your budget. But you can have all these like giant goals in your PCP that are unrelated to your disability. And therefore it is irrelevant that you have them in there because they're not going to relate to any of your IPP goals. So it is more important to spend time researching your regional center's website and the kinds of services and supports they provide in the traditional system.
Thank you very much, Judy. I have another question from Al. Can I hire someone to clean the house paid by my spending plan?
Yes. Yes, you absolutely can hire a housekeeper. It is under living supports, I believe. It specifically says that. I'm looking at the list of services that have been approved.
I paid for a housekeeper.
Yeah,
Oh,
there
yeah.
you go, right there. Where is it? Hold on, I actually just had to read this yesterday. So it's called Community Living Supports. And in there, it very specifically says home and personal care, preparing meals, planning meals, money management, laundry, heavy household chores such as washing floors, windows and walls, securing loose rugs and tiles, moving heavy items or furniture in order to provide safe access, as well as minor repairs as those that could be completed by a handyman. All right. All right.
Thank you, Judy.
Oh, so I see that Connie Boyer raised her hand, so I'm going to unmute her. Give you a little break, Ed. Hey, Connie, you want to unmute? Okay, Connie's not there. You need to unmute, Connie. All right, so let's go on to the next question. Go ahead, Ed.
Sure thing. I have just now popped, actually, I'm just now popping it in chat. Please no one, oh, hold on one second. I'm going to do it again. Please no one post in chat. Lorna, could you please translate what I have just posted in chat from Spanish? Judy, just a reminder, you will need to rephrase what Lorna says for Helen.
Thank you. I have a big note saying that.
I'm unmuted, by the way, now, Judy. I don't know what.
Okay, Connie. All right, let's do this Spanish question first.
Okay.
Lorna, I'm not hearing you.
Me neither, Lorna.
Maybe. I'm not sure why.
Hold on. I'm going to hop into Spanish real quick.
Okay. All right. So, while we're figuring that out, well, maybe we'll wait just real quick.
Yeah, I'm not hearing any Spanish translation.
Okay. Not sure, Lorna, are you there? For those of you who are using the Spanish interpretation, are you hearing it? Please put it in the chat if you are not.
Usually we get messages.
Yeah, we would. Okay. All right, Connie, go ahead and say your question.
Okay, I have two quick, well, the first one is sort of a yes, no, quick one. Can paid internship programs and crisis response teams be put in the SDP budget? And is it limited to a certain amount of time, usually less than a year? I've heard rumblings that this type of program is not allowed in the SDP. So we're talking about paid internship and crisis response teams.
Okay. So for sure, the paid internship program is not in your SDP budget. However, you can still access that service. The reason is because the paid internship program is a state-only funded program. We cannot ask the federal government to match any of those funds. So what you would have is you would have your self-determination program and the paid internship program. So you would have both services, one in self-determination and one outside of self-determination. Now for crisis services, I don't believe, and maybe someone wants to raise their hand and give me an answer to this, because I'm not completely sure, but I don't believe crisis services is one of these services that the federal government won't fund. I know for sure they'll fund it. So it wouldn't be outside of your self-determination program. And what I believe could potentially happen is that if you are in a crisis, you could ask for a temporary increase in your budget for a certain period of time to get you through that crisis. Okay. So, but if you want to specifically use like the SMART team or the START team or whatever they're called at your regional center, I am sure that would be outside of your budget. I would think, Connie, I don't think it ends up, either of those things end up in your total budget amount.
Okay, thank you. And then the next question is a little technical, but I bet other people have faced this. If you currently have courtesy vendorizations, let's say for a major service like SLS, is in terms of getting the amount that's approved for that budget, is it based on the regional center rules and funding where the consumer actually lives, or is it based on the funding and rules of the regional center where the provider is vendored?
Okay, so it should absolutely be based on the amount of money that your regional center is paying for that vendor, regardless of whether they're a guest vendor or not. Tons of people use guest vendors all the time for lots of different reasons, particularly where I live in LA, where there's 7 regional centers in our county alone. So, I mean, I can tell you this, that we had a guest vendor in my son's original individual budgets, which when we were figuring out the budget, it was based on that amount that they came in at, and that stayed in the budget. So I think it is, if a regional center wants to argue, well, that was a guest and that's not our normal rates, well, then why did you approve it in the traditional system? It's based on what you approved in the traditional system. So it should.
What if the regional center says it's based on the rules of the other regional center?
It is based on what your regional center has been paying for you to receive that service. And if that's a higher amount than they usually pay, it doesn't matter. There was a reason that they approved that guest vendor, and that reason has not changed.
Thank you.
Thanks, Connie. Okay, another question from you, Ed.
Yes. I'm gonna pop that question back into chat for Lorna. Everyone, please do not post in chat. Lorna is back. Lorna, if you could please translate what I've just popped into chat, and Judy, you know to rephrase it.
Okay, well, Teresa, recreational programs are definitely not a generic resource at all. However, some of you may know that that in the same July budget where they extended the service, they expanded the services for people who live at home to get supported living services. They also restored social and recreational programs and camp and non-medical therapies. So this is a really great thing. The problem is that regional centers have not been given direction on how to offer these services to people in the traditional system, which means they haven't been able to figure out how it will work for people in the self-determination program. This is something that I recently did ask of DDS what their timing is, and they said they're working on it. We hope it'll happen sooner rather than later. But it is definitely not a generic resource. It's just right now, we don't know exactly when it's going to start. I'm hoping in the next couple of months. Okay, Ed, another one?
Absolutely. So our next one is from the chat. It is from Susan. If there are changes in the spending plan, like to add or deduct a service, do we need to always send a new spending plan, or will the regional center accounting department just amend it?
Well, you definitely have to alert any change to your spending plan to both your FMS and your regional center. So let's say it's something as simple as, I didn't like that art class. I'd rather take a dance class. Obviously, you need to let your FMS know because they need to send the check to someone else. And you also need to let your regional center know because they, on the back end of the accounting department, have all these systems, which we're really hoping can get streamlined because it's so ridiculous and bureaucratic. And I know the regional centers want it streamlined too. So, but what does that mean? Does that mean that regional centers are approving the changes in your spending plan? Absolutely not. However, they do need to ask you where you're getting this service. So let's say it's back to what I said, you didn't like the art class, instead you want to take a dance class. You have to show that that dance class is integrated into the community. So you're not going to a segregated dance class. But that's the only question they really should be answering, right? Asking, I mean. Is it, where are you getting this service? What's the setting? Oh, the setting is at the community college also? Okay, move along. I don't really understand. I heard recently that when you have even like a $50 change in your spending plan, 6 different people at the regional center touch that change in some way. And I mean, that's ridiculous. That's how come it's taking months to get a tiny change in the spending plan. So this is something that I have brought up to DDS. Regional centers are very supportive of making this an easier process because it's ridiculous. So hoping to advocate on that as we move forward. I'm going to unmute Teresa Fazio to ask her question.
Hi, everyone. Yep, I just have a couple of them. So getting back to the very beginning, where the regional centers, I get all of these different answers because I'm helping out different parents about the independent facilitator. Some regional centers are saying, oh, we're going to do a one-time payment just this first time, and they're going to pay for it. And then other ones say, no, we're not paying for it. So what is going on with that? Like,
give me an example. I'm not sure I understand the question.
okay, so the independent facilitator, you say that it must be in your budget, but I've heard some regional centers say that they will be adding that, I guess, to the budget one time only, going into self-determination, and other ones say, no, we're not paying. We're not adding that to the budget.
Okay, so
The fee, the $2,500 fee.
okay, yeah. So that $2,500 fee is never added to your budget, ever. Okay, so that $2,500, and you don't have to use it all. I didn't use it all. It is up to $2,500 for the most complex cases. Remember, we have responsibility. This is government funds. You shouldn't be paying people tons of money to do a person-centered plan. It shouldn't cost that much. So unless you have a very complicated case, which many people do, I understand. So, so that $2,500 is through the traditional system. It's through a code called 024. You use it one time only to move into the program. So if you're going to need an independent facilitator in the future, you will have to take it from the individual budget amount that you agreed to during your IPP, and it will not include the $2,500.
So who pays for it? The regional center?
Regional center.
Okay,
So
and then
the independent facilitator sends an invoice. Sometimes, like in my case, our independent facilitator gave me the invoice and then I forwarded it to my service coordinator who got the bill paid. In other cases, the independent facilitator has a direct relationship with the regional center and sends it directly to them.
okay, got it. And then on another note for the taxes, getting back to the taxes part of it, for the employees, the employer burden, which a lot of people, I guess, don't realize until you really get into it. Who is actually responsible for the employer burden? I realize it comes out of your budget, but it seems crazy that the client needs to be responsible for the employer burden part, which is basically matching the Medicare and the SSI for the
So the
employee.
client is responsible because the client is the employer. So it's not the client personally, remember, it's your self-determination budget.
Right.
So as I was giving those examples with Roger Rabbit's program, it accounted for, if you're paying somebody $20 an hour, you have to make sure that you have the 8.25% of federal taxes and the state taxes on top of that, and then your Medicare and your FICA and all that kind of stuff. So your FMS can help you figure out what that amounts to, but it's roughly around 12% or so per dollar. So instead of paying somebody $1 an hour, you're paying them $1.12 an hour, even though they're only going to receive the dollar. Those
Right.
taxes are extra.
Right,
okay?
so for those of us who have a very, very low budget because they were in the traditional system at a 1.3 and now going into a 1.1 position where they can do more things in the self-determination program, then obviously I need to adjust that 1.3 to a 1.1 into the self-determination program before I go into the self-determination.
Yeah, I mean, in that case, you would have to make the case that in the traditional system, you needed a 1-to-1 and that a 1-to-3 was not meeting your needs. But that's in the traditional system, right? But remember that even at the 1-to-3 rate of, let's say, a day program, that 1-to-3 rate is still relatively high. It's sometimes like $22 or $25 an hour. And because you're using a day program or an agency that has administrative costs and supervisors and office rent and copy machines. Like when you're starting to hire people directly, you don't have all those administrative fees. You still have to pay the taxes, you still have to have insurance for them, but you don't have to, you don't have all those administrative fees and costs. So it still may be enough. But if you feel like 1-to-3 was not enough, you will have to prove that at the IPP. And it's very provable, by the way. They may have been stuck in this 1-to-3 day program, and maybe ran away a lot, or I hear this all the time, sat in soiled diapers, or aspirated while they were eating because they were not getting that one-on-one attention from a staff member. So you want to be able to document why that was not an appropriate service. Okay.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right, go ahead, Ed.
Thank you. Sorry, just finishing my snack real quick. Okay, so the next question that I have is from an anonymous question asker who says, I have an anonymous favor. There are a few regional centers that are still telling people that 024 funds are only for person-centered plans. Could you please ask Judy to reiterate that the 2,500 is for the person-centered plan plus the necessary steps to enter the self-determination program, such as assisting with the budget, the spending plan, researching resources for goods and services needed to meet IPP goals?
All of that. You could have just said it, you anonymous person yourself. There is actually a very overly complicated directive that specifically says that came out this summer. And it very specifically says that you have up to $2,500 available for you to transition into the program, and that there are all these different kinds of services an independent facilitator can provide for to use those funds for. And it specifically says to advocate for you at your IPP, to help you identify services and supports in the community, to help you develop your spending plan. Has lots of things beyond the doing the person-centered plan. This is directives directly from the Department of Developmental Services. It is, we had a whole SDB Connect on this, by the way, probably back in early July, mid-July. So I encourage you to go back and watch some of them, because I actually went through the directives in incredible detail about this back then.
Thank you, Judy. I have from Beth. I received an NOA, I believe that stands for Notice of Action, for denial of full budgeted traditional respite based on actual usage. It was denied based on actual usage, even though the restrictions of the vendor and the availability of consistent / acceptable staff made it impossible. I have an informal meeting with the regional center next week to discuss as first step in fair hearing. Is there any guidance for me, please?
Well, DDS has issued a directive to the regional centers. Well, I don't know if it's in a directive. It may have been in a meeting that they said this to them, that it is completely relevant as a change in circumstance, that there was an international pandemic out of your control, that you were either feared having staff in your home, or maybe you did have staff in the home who got COVID, or maybe you got COVID, all of the above. And that the regional center should take that into account as a change in circumstances or unmet need as you are developing your budget amount. If your regional center is denying that, and I'm hearing that a few are, that you should be going, someday we're going to have an ombuds person that you can go to make this complaint, but right now we don't. And I'm serving, I feel like, as the informal ombuds person of the self-determination program, because I get your emails and letters all the time, many of which I never answer. So I apologize. I have a lot going on. So, the COVID is absolutely an example of someone not being able to utilize the services that they were provided, and that you should be able to get your budget back. So
Judy, if I may cut in, Beth is clarifying that they used the year before COVID, and I just like to ask if that is standard practice or if that is what they should be doing.
yeah. So they looked at the year before, not the COVID year.
Correct.
Okay. Oh, that's weird. I'm going to unmute Beth so she can explain that. That is weird.
It was weird. Hi, Judy. So I'm one of those aging parents, and I'm trying to get additional coverage support for my son who still lives at home. And they denied it based on usage, first for the COVID year, and then I pushed back on that with all your guidance from a month or so ago. Then they went back and pulled it for the year prior to COVID and said, well, you didn't use it all then either, so we're not going to give it to you. And so I had to provide them, I have breast cancer, so I had to provide them with documentation of appointments and all that kind of stuff.
Oh,
And then they gave it to me for 3 months, and then I got a note from my psychiatrist, and then they gave it to me for most of the rest of the year, but it's clearly in there as this is an exception, not as, this is a need. And they said because I didn't use it, it wasn't needed, basically. So
Okay,
what should I
so-
say to them in the
Yeah.
informal discussion?
okay. So circumstances have changed,
Right.
in many ways, in your health, in the needs.
Yeah.
So one of the things that's really important in a self-determination budget meeting is that you're not just looking at the past, but you're also looking into the future. Like what
Right.
is happening now in that individual's life and what's going to be happening in the next year. So you may have a person who, is leaving high school. So it doesn't mean, leaving high school in a month. It doesn't mean it's like, well, in the last year you weren't in high school. I mean, you were in high school, so you don't get any more money because the day of your IPP, you're still in high school. Things change. People's health change, people's behaviors change, people's lives change, just like all the rest of us, whether we have a disability or not. And so you really gotta get them to focus on the future, on what the needs are for your son now and into the next 12 months. And to stop this nonsense. It's ridiculous. And to put you through, you're already under so much stress. By the way, you're not the only parent that I've met who's going through cancer treatments, who are being sort of absolutely bullied by the regional center into getting the kinds of supports you need for your child. So I apologize on behalf of all regional centers, even though I speak for none of them.
Thank you. But is there anything, so just focus on the future in that informal meeting? Is there anything I should specifically?
What I
with that
always tell
general?
people to do at these meetings is to lay out 24-hour days, 7 days a week of that individual and say, here is, my son needs 24/7 supports. And here is how he's being supported currently. And here are all these hours where he's not getting supported because I don't feel well and I can't help him, or I'm at the hospital, or I'm at the doctor's, and to lay out all those hours where they're assuming that you're going to do it for him.
Mhm.
Or that, you never used staff in the past. So
Right.
Good
Yeah, and
luck, Beth.
that's what we did. So I can review that with them in the informal
Yeah.
thing. But then you feel like that's a valid case to take forward to fair hearing?
Absolutely, 100%,
Okay,
100%.
thank you.
All
Thank
right,
you.
good luck, Beth.
Thank you.
I'm just gonna real quick, we only have a minute or two left. Anna, you've had your hand up for a long time.
Yeah, thank you so much. I have a question like regarding the hiring. Is that like the FMS saying that the asking for hiring person is a vendor or employee? What if I hire as a PA or like respite care person as a vendor? Is that fine for like being vendor instead of the
Yeah.
employee?
Yes, definitely. Okay. Definitely, you can continue to use traditional vendors. In my case, my son's case, we are using one traditional vendor to provide one service, and others are not vendors. You can do that, and if you're using all vendors, traditional vendors, then you're actually just using the bill payer model of the FMS, because all they're doing is getting invoices. You're not hiring individuals specifically, and the employer of record is always one of these agencies. It's not something I recommend in the self-determination program, because the reason why you're trying to get away from a lot of agencies who have a lot of these administrative costs. But if you really like using that agency, then you should do that, and it's absolutely allowed. So once again, I apologize because we are out of time. We lose both of our Korean and our Spanish interpreters at 6 o'clock, and we're a little bit over. We're not going to be back for 2 weeks. We're going to be back on September 22nd. And we promise we will try to get your questions answered then. In the meantime, this would be a good time on Wednesdays at 4:30 to look through our library